I wasn't the genius in the office. I wasn't the guy closing six-figure deals or giving TED Talk level pep speeches about synergy. I was the guy who made sure the invoices matched the contracts and that the lights stayed on when the weekend deployment fried our servers. I liked it that way. Invisible, reliable, unimportant enough to survive every reorg. Until the night of the Christmas party. The company had rented out a downtown restaurant that looked expensive only in low light. Fake candles, gold foil banners spelling out Winter Gala 2022, and a DJ who looked like he'd been paid in leftover drink tickets. I showed up because HR made attendance strongly encouraged. I even wore a blazer for once, one that still had the dry cleaning tag inside. The CEO, Brandon Kerr, was already holding court near the bar. Perfect teeth, perfect hair, the kind of guy who thought silence in a room meant people were waiting for him to talk. He'd made his fortune in other people's sweat and called it vision. That night, his cheeks were flushed, tie loose, glass always half full of something amber. By the time dinner was served, everyone had been drinking long enough to forget how much they hated each other. The CFO was telling the same story about saving the company in 2019. The interns were filming everything for TikTok. I sat near the end of the table, cutting dry turkey, listening. Then Brandon stood, fork clinking against his glass. "All right, folks," he said, voice thick with self-importance. "Before dessert, I just want to say, look around you. We made it through another year." Polite applause. He smiled wider. "Not everyone in this room produces. Some of us, well, some just lech off the ones who do." Laughter rippled, unsure at first. Then he added, "But hey, every system needs its bottom feeders, right?" And turned his gaze directly at me. I didn't laugh. Nobody did for long. Forks clinked, glasses shifted. A few people glanced at me with that strained grin that means I'm so sorry, but please don't make this awkward. Brandon raised his drink in my direction. "To the Leeches, keeping the system clean." More laughter now, forced, brittle. Someone at the other end muttered, "Jesus, Brandon!" But he didn't care. He loved the sound of his own cruelty. I felt my throat tighten, but I just nodded, half smiled, and lifted my glass back. "Water, not whiskey. To staying clean," I said quietly. A few people caught it, a few didn't. The DJ cranked up the volume before anyone could answer. The rest of the night blurred. Small talk, bad jokes, people pretending it hadn't happened. I left early, said something about an early flight. On my way out, I saw my reflection in the glass doors. Cheap blazer, tired eyes, the kind of man easy to forget. At home, I sat in the dark, coat still on, laptop open. My resignation letter was already half written, a draft I'd been updating for months, just in case. I finished it. Simple, polite. 2 paragraphs, scheduled to send at 9 a.m. sharp. Then I opened the shared compliance folder, the one Brandon never remembered I managed. Every file I accessed was legal, routine, logged. But looking at the audit trail, I could see the company's pulse. Payments delayed, vendor credits stretched, credit line nearly maxed. The Christmas party had cost more than a quarterly bonus cycle. They didn't even have the margin for it. I didn't copy anything private. I didn't need to. I already knew enough. At 11:47 p.m., I wrote one note to myself in a plain text file. Never argue with a man drunk on borrowed money. Then I closed the laptop and sat there, listening to the hum of the radiator, waiting for midnight like it might turn me into someone else. At 8:59 a.m., the scheduled email went out. By 9:15, my access to Slack disappeared. 10 minutes later, the HR manager called. "You're sure about this?" she asked softly. I said I was. She sighed, said she understood. No one from leadership called. Not Brandon, not the CFO. But around noon, my phone buzzed. A text from Lauren, the project manager who'd once covered for me when I was sick. "Saw what happened last night. He's an ass. You didn't deserve that." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied, "Thanks. I'll be fine." It wasn't bravado. it was a decision. By evening, my desk was cleared, keycard turned in, inbox deleted. I took the long way home, past the same glass tower where Brandon's office overlooked the city. The lights were still on. He was probably in there laughing about how easily people could be replaced. He was half right. At the next red light, I opened a new note on my phone. Title: Things They'll Regret. Under it, one bullet: Cash flow beats charisma. It wasn't revenge I wanted, it was balance. And balance, unlike luck, is something you can build. When you walk away from a company, you expect silence. Maybe a few awkward LinkedIn messages, a form email about future collaborations. What I didn't expect was how loud the quiet felt. No alarms, no calendar pings, no one asking me to jump on a quick sync. Just me, a kitchen table, a half-drunk coffee, and the hum of a refrigerator that sounded like freedom and panic at the same time. The first morning after quitting, I sat there staring at my phone, waiting for something, regret, fear, purpose, to show up. Instead, I opened my laptop, logged into the free version of Notion, and wrote one line at the top of a blank page. No job, no safety net. Build something that works. I didn't start with a business plan. I started with spreadsheets. For years, I'd been patching over my old company's mess, reconciling invoices, catching duplicate payments, manually reminding clients to approve ACH transfers. The tedious, invisible work nobody thanked me for. The kind of work that, when done right, disappears. But I'd learned its patterns, and patterns are where automation lives. So I built, not a startup, a system, a simple tool that could pull transaction data from small businesses, categorize it automatically, flag anomalies, and send clean reports to whoever needed them. No fancy UI, just function. I called it Ledger One because I didn't have the energy for branding. 3 days in, I got an email from a vendor I used to handle at the old job. Hey man, sorry about what happened at the party. Heard you left. You doing consulting now? I wasn't, but I could be. By the end of the week, I had my first client, a small logistics firm in Ohio that just needed someone to fix their accounts payable nightmare. I didn't pitch, I just listened, asked questions, and offered to try my tool for free. It worked. Within 2 days, their CFO emailed, "Whatever you did, it's magic. Send the invoice." That Tuatu's $100 payment hit my account on a Friday afternoon. It wasn't much, but it was mine. No approval chain, no Brandon Kerr signing off. Just clean money for clean work. I kept building. Nights bled into mornings. My apartment turned into a war zone of sticky notes and empty coffee cups. I ate like a grad student and slept like a criminal hiding from himself. But with every client I onboarded, the silence got quieter. Then came the first sign of karma. A former coworker, the kind who always heard everything before it became public, DM'd me. "Dude, you won't believe this. They bounced a vendor payment. Payroll's late for half the staff. Brandon blamed AITA." I laughed, just once out loud. The kind of laugh that tastes like closure. I didn't celebrate, though. I'd seen companies fall apart before. Most of them didn't die of malice. They died of arrogance. Brandon's arrogance was terminal. A week later, another text came in, this time from the same vendor who'd emailed me before. "You didn't hear it from me, but they maxed their line of credit. Spent a fortune on that party. The bank's breathing down their necks." I almost replied good, but I didn't. Instead, I asked how their other clients were handling billing and discovered half of them were looking for alternatives. Faster reporting, better visibility, less ego. That night, I created a deck, not a startup pitch. Just a list titled, "The Company I'd Actually Want to Work With." It had 3 bullets. 1, pay people on time. 2, tell the truth about cash flow. 3, never hire someone you wouldn't thank publicly. I put the deck online, shared it with a small business forum. Within a week, 2 more clients reached out. By the end of the month, I was earning more than my old salary. Not rich, just steady. Sustainable. and then quietly an old number popped up on my phone. It was the CFO, the one who'd clapped at the Leech joke a little too loudly. "Hey, you got a minute?" His voice was low, shaky. "Sure," I said, pretending I didn't already know why he was calling. He exhaled. "Look, man, things are rough over here. Brandon's blaming everyone. He's talking about restructuring, maybe layoffs." I said nothing. "You were always good with numbers," he continued. "If you know any contract ops people, maybe send them our way?" That's when it clicked. The company wasn't just bleeding money. It was bleeding control. "Send me the specs," I said. "I'll see what I can do." He emailed me a summary that wasn't supposed to leave the building. Upcoming payment schedules, cash reserves, and buried deep in the footnotes, the name of the private credit fund that financed their line, Meridian Capital Partners. I'd worked with Meridian once. Back when I was still invisible, I'd prepared their audit packet. Clean, compliant, precise. I remembered their analyst, a quiet man named Jacobs, who noticed things others didn't. I found his old email, still active. Typed, slowly. "Hey Jacobs, you might not remember me. I used to send you the quarterly variance reports for Core Dynamics. If your team's still monitoring their covenants, you might want to take a closer look at December's disbursements. Something's off. No NDA breach here. All public filings. Just thought you'd want to know." I didn't hit send right away. My cursor blinked like a heartbeat. Then I whispered what had become my quiet mantra since that night at the party. "Cash flow beats charisma." And I pressed send. By midnight, Jacobs had replied, "Appreciate the heads up. Let's talk." It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was alignment. The kind of alignment that tilts the entire table. Slowly, quietly, until the man at the top starts to slide. Jacobs didn't waste time. Within an hour of my email, we were on a call. His voice calm, exact. Every syllable placed like a chess piece. "I remember you," he said. "You were the only one who labeled attachments properly." That was his version of a compliment. He asked what I had seen. I told him what was public. Vendor payment delays, credit draw patterns, bloated discretionary spend, all visible through filings and supplier chatter. I didn't speculate. I didn't accuse. I just showed the math. Silence stretched on his end. Then a quiet, "That explains the missed interest buffer." Meridian Capital wasn't some predatory lender. They were disciplined, patient, the kind of fund that stepped in when banks got nervous. And right now, they were very, very nervous. Jacobs asked if I could prepare a clean version of the company's structure, just to stress test assumptions. No names, no leaks, just architecture. I spent 3 nights doing it. Coffee, takeout, the hum of my monitor. I mapped every process I'd once managed. Accounts payable to vendor cycles, recurring expenses, salary ladders, bonus accruals. I knew the skeleton better than anyone. I didn't embellish a thing. I just made the bones visible. When I sent the model back, Jacobs wrote one line. "This is cleaner than their audited statements." A week later, he called again. His tone had shifted, from curiosity to opportunity. "Between us," he said, "we're seeing covenant breaches, late filings. There's talk of a liquidity event if the next payment doesn't clear. Brandon's trying to raise bridge financing through secondary lenders. It won't end well." I didn't say it out loud, but I knew. Brandon Kerr's empire was cracking under the weight of his ego. Jacobs continued, "We're evaluating operational control options. Hypothetically, if someone with institutional knowledge could step in temporarily, clean up reporting, stabilize ops. Would that person exist?" I paused. My stomach tightened. "Hypothetically," he smiled through the phone. "For now." 2 days later, I was sitting in a coffee shop across from Meridian's downtown office, laptop open, hands shaking slightly. Jacobs arrived right on time. Gray suit, no tie, the kind of man who read people faster than spreadsheets. He laid out the situation like a surgeon describing a failing heart. Core Dynamics had defaulted on two minor covenants, burned through its cash buffer, and maxed its credit facility. Payroll barely cleared. The next vendor run would bounce. The board didn't know yet. Brandon was stalling them with charm and half-truce. Meridian was within its rights to enforce a takeover clause. All they needed was a capable interim operator with credibility inside the company and enough domain knowledge to stabilize it. Jacobs leaned forward. You're not the type to seek revenge. That's good. You're the type who finishes unfinished work. We can provide capital, oversight, and legal cover. You provide the fix. My throat went dry. You're talking about me buying my old company. He shrugged. We'll fund the buy-in. You'll lead it. Call it poetic governance. I laughed once because it was insane. I'd left that place 2 months ago as a ghost, the guy they called a leech. Now they wanted me to take the wheel of the wreck. Jacob sipped his coffee. Think about it. And when you do, remember, debt doesn't care about charisma. The next 72 hours blurred into one long spreadsheet. I modeled scenarios, mapped risk, checked compliance angles. Meridian's lawyers drafted a quiet offer. They'd wire emergency funds to cover payroll and vendor arrears. But only if Brandon and the executive team signed a standstill agreement, transferring operational control. Brandon didn't see it coming. On a rainy Thursday, the company missed a key vendor payment. That triggered an automatic covenant breach. Within minutes, Meridian's notice hit their inboxes. Polite, surgical, lethal. Default event declared. Immediate remedy required. Brandon panicked. Tried to call Jacobs. Tried to negotiate. Tried to bluff. None of it mattered. The fund held all the paper. And when your empire runs on borrowed money, the man holding the paper is the emperor. By Friday evening, Meridian called me again. They'll sign, Jacob said. We'll execute Monday. You'll come in as interim managing director. The buy-in terms are attached. You'll own 5% personally. The rest sits with us until you stabilize the ship. I opened the document. Numbers, signatures, power. All neat, clinical. 4 weeks ago, I had walked out of that glass building humiliated. Now they were inviting me back through the front door with a badge that said, Owner. I didn't feel joy. I felt gravity. That weekend, I barely slept. My old colleagues texted rumors. Brandon locking himself in his office. HR whispering about emergency meetings, accounting in chaos. I said nothing. I went for a walk at dawn, wind cutting across the empty streets, and stopped outside my reflection in a dark window. Same cheap blazer, same tired eyes, different man. Monday came cold and bright. Meridian's car waited outside my building. On the seat next to me lay a single folder. The executed takeover documents. The company I'd built from the shadows now had my name at the top. When we pulled up to the glass tower, I could see Brandon through the lobby window, arguing into his phone, face red, movements sharp and desperate. Jacobs looked at me. You ready? I nodded once. He smiled faintly. Good. Then let's go introduce the Leech to his new host. The lobby looked the same as the day I'd left. Polished marble, fake plants, that faint smell of expensive cleaning products meant to impress visitors. But something was off. People weren't moving with that easy, forced confidence anymore. Conversations stopped when we walked in. Heads turned, phones lowered. Brandon saw me first. His voice, that smooth, self-satisfied tone that once filled every room, cracked like a bad mic. What the hell is he doing here? Jacobs didn't answer. He just gestured toward the elevators. Conference room, now. The ride up was silent except for the soft hum of cables and Brandon's muttered swears. I could see him in the reflection, jaw tight, sweat shining just above the collar of his custom shirt. He still wore the same smug suit from his press photos, but now it hung off him like a costume that no longer fit. When the doors opened, the exec team was already there. The CFO, the HR director, a few board observers, pale, stiff, pretending they weren't terrified. A folder sat at every chair, neatly labeled with Meridian's logo. Jacobs placed his briefcase on the table. "Gentlemen, we'll make this quick." He outlined the facts in his usual surgical rhythm. Missed covenant compliance, 2 unremedied vendor defaults, insolvent cash position, immediate execution of security rights. Brandon tried to interrupt 3 times. Each time, Jacobs kept talking as if he didn't exist. When he finished, he folded his hands and said almost casually, "Operational control will transfer to the undersigned effective immediately." Brandon blinked. "The undersigned? Who the hell is that supposed to be?" Jacobs turned slightly, eyes landing on me. "Mr. Carter." The room went still. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just opened my folder, signed the page where my name was already printed, and slid it across the table. Brandon's face flushed red. "You gotta be kidding me. Him? The guy who... what did I call you? Yeah, the Leech. You think he can run this company?" Jacobs looked at him the way an executioner looks at a broken sword. "The Leech," he said evenly, "is now your majority operator, and if you want to keep your severance package, you'll sign your own exit documents quietly." Brandon laughed, a hollow, desperate sound. "You think you can just walk in here and—" I cut him off, calm but sharp. "I don't think, Brandon. I read the loan agreements. You signed them." The words hit harder than I expected. He went silent, blinking fast, then glanced around the room looking for allies. None met his eyes. Even the CFO was staring at the table. Jacob slid another folder toward him. "Your final terms. 6 months. Severance, confidentiality clause, non-compete limited to a year. If you decline, we proceed under Clause 9B and pursue recovery personally." Brandon's hands trembled as he opened it. He scanned the pages, jaw working, lips moving without sound. Then finally, the pen scratched. The noise was small, just a ballpoint on paper, but it sounded like a gunshot. When he finished, he pushed the folder away and looked up at me. "You think you won, huh?" His voice was a whisper now, stripped of all authority. "You'll see how hard this is. You'll drown in it." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "Maybe. But at least I'll drown doing the work, not pretending I'm too important for it." He stared at me for a long second, then stood abruptly, chair scraping loud enough to make everyone flinch. Without another word, he walked out. The door clicked shut behind him, and the room exhaled. Jacobs looked at me. "Congratulations, Mr. Carter. The floor is yours." I nodded, stood, and turned toward the team. People who'd worked under Brandon's chaos for years. People who'd been humiliated, ignored, underpaid. I didn't give a speech. I just said, "Paydays are back on schedule. Vendors first, staff second. No parties, no fluff. We fix the product, we fix the books. We rebuild trust. If you want in, stay. If you don't, I'll write you a clean reference myself. No applause. Just quiet, the kind that means people are listening for once." The weeks that followed were brutal. Long nights, tight calls, 1,000 small fires. But for the first time, the company worked. People stopped whispering in hallways. Clients called back. Payroll cleared on time. Lauren, the project manager who'd texted me after the party, stopped by my office one evening with takeout. "You look like you haven't slept since the takeover," she said, setting the bag down. "I haven't," I admitted. She smiled. "Well, you don't look like a leech anymore." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. By spring, the numbers spoke for themselves. Profits steady, staff retention up, vendor satisfaction through the roof. Meridian gradually stepped back. My 5% grew to 15. The fund prepared its exit, and for once, everyone walked away with more than they came in with. The last time I saw Brandon was at the notary's office. He was thinner, grayer, still pretending he didn't see me. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The silence was doing the talking now. On my final night in that building, I stayed late, walking through the empty floors. Desks clean, lights low. The whiteboard in the break room had been erased, but someone had written a new phrase at the bottom in marker. "No heroes, only checklists." I left it there. Outside, the city buzzed, indifferent, endless, alive. I stopped on the sidewalk, looked up at the tower one last time, and thought about that night at the Christmas party. The laughter, the sting, the way everyone looked away. Now the lights on the top floor burned steady again, not because of ego, but because someone remembered to pay the bill. I didn't feel victorious. I felt level, balance restored. I unlocked my car, sat for a moment with the engine off, and let the quiet fill everything. Then I smiled, barely, and whispered to no one, "Cash flow beats charisma," and drove home.